Still between 1910 and 1920. This is your hand drill, an original one. Drill marks, you'll see them on the side of the walls, these lines. And all this is a steel bar, 2 chiseled ends and a 10-pound weight at the bottom. The drill is called a jumper. 10-pound weight is called a clapper. The 2 chiseled ends, they're worn down by now, but they would have been sharpened in the blacksmith on site. They had a blacksmith on site. That would be taken out of your wages as well at the end of the month. So every Friday they get they sharpen their tools. What you do with this, we have to imagine now as well, is you're going to be up over there, between a 30 and a 40 degree, between a 30 and a 40 degree angle, keeping yourself in place, about 30 feet up in the air, chain around your leg, candle next to you, that's all the light you're going to have. And you would be using those candles sparingly as well, because if you're in poor quality chambers, because you borrowed from the company when you first started off, then if you're not producing, because if you're in poor quality chambers, you're extracting just as much, but you're not producing as much. That's when you could end up owing the company money. So in those situations, once you lift and twist, that's how you drill. Once you've gone into about 2 or 3 inches, you know where you are. You could blow your candle out and you could potentially be drilling in total darkness at some point of the day. So what you do with this, lift, twist. That's how you drill the hole. Once you hit the weights, you start hearing clapping noise, you know then you need to turn it upside down and start again on the other end. You'd be doing well if you drilled 7 foot in a day with one of these. That wouldn't be unheard of. But you would average between 3 and 5 feet in a day, depending on how strong you're feeling that day. If you needed a deeper hole, these can go up to around 20 feet or more. There's a really long one there. So you're going to be drilling and preparing at the beginning of the month. Middle of the month, you're going to be sending your stuff up to the surface, and then towards the end of the month is a big push to make the finished roofing slates, because that's what you paid for at the end of the day, the finished roofing slates, your product. And as you're drilling, you're pouring water into the hole at various points, so the dust turns into clay, and then it's easier to clean the hole out. Inadvertently, you are keeping the dust down. Cleaning the hole out, you need this tool called a scraper. So this side, scrape the clay out of it. The other side, it's like a needle eye. You put some dry moss aside there, which you would have gathered on your way to work or on your way from work, and you dry the hole out. You need the hole to be dry, or else the gunpowder wouldn't work. And before we put gunpowder in, you need a fuse wire, and this is what they would have had. A piece of rope or a piece of twine, dipped into tar, rolled into the gunpowder, then into the hole. That would be unpredictable, so that would be dangerous. A modern day fuse wire can burn at a foot a minute, and it would burn underwater as well, so it would have been like luxury for the men, but they didn't have that until the 1900s. So the fuse wire in first, then the gunpowder. They didn't use dynamite to extract. When we're talking about explosives, first thing you're going to think about is dynamite, and I think this is because of cartoons. Does anybody know when dynamite was invented and by whom? No, you're wrong. Nope. Nobody at all?
Oh, it's the award that everybody gives away every year.
Sorry?
What's it called? What's the award called?
I know what it is called, and I know I'm asking you the question.
Nobel.
Nobel, thank you.
So, Alfred Nobel, do you know what date? Which year?
18,
Do you want to guess?
1880s? I don't know.
You're not far off. 1866. So we're talking about the 1850s, so it wasn't around. But with dynamite, it's too powerful and it would shatter the slate. So you've got nothing to work with. When it did come into action, they would use it for blasting through the tunnels, not for extracting. Gunpowder, that's where China is where gunpowder came from. Well, it originated, that's what they tell me, I mean, 3,000 years ago, it's a long time. It was brought over to Europe in the 1100s, and it's good for extracting because it'll send a shock, and it won't destroy what you're going to work with later on. And it's one of the last industries to still use gunpowder as well, because it's good for extracting. So gunpowder would be kept in a safe box or a barrel at least 20 feet away from your working area. fill one of these up full of gunpowder. This is called a bugle. This would be made out of brass or copper, soft metal so you don't get the sparks. This would be on your hip. It would have looked like this originally, yeah? And then be on your hip. When you're ready, you pour the gunpowder into the hole to around 2 inches from the top, and then you plug it in with paper or seal it with paper first, slate gravel on top of the paper, and then stamp it all down with one of these tools called a stamper. Brass or copper, again so you don't get sparks. Groove at the bottom to protect the fuse, and a wooden or a copper-headed mallet. Stamp it all down as compactly as you could. Then when you're ready to blast, you're usually blasting at the end of the day. You tell your workmates to get into the safety of the tunnel. Once they're in the safety of the tunnel, you can then light the fuse and get into the safety of the tunnel yourself. You're waiting for the blast to go off, make sure everything's gone off accordingly, then you can make your way out. Come back in the morning when the dust has settled, find your slabs, and this is an important part, you have to mark your piece with your chamber number, the level that it's come from, or your initials or a nickname. This is so that your teammates can identify the pieces up in the mill. Because if you're taking somebody else's piece, you're taking their wages, that's stealing, and you wouldn't get any work anywhere else if you were caught stealing. And in the 1700s, they used to flog women and they used to hang men for stealing and for petty things as well. So you don't steal, and you're marking it so that doesn't happen. And then that gets hauled up to the surface and processed in the mill. And I'm making that sound simple, but you're going to be 30 feet up in the air maybe, with only a candle for light to get it from A to B. That's a job in itself. And before we move on to the next section, I'll explain about the hats. So the person that owned the hats needed to go home early because he had to attend the meeting. And instead of using the proper tool, like the brass stamper or the copper stamper, he used one of these, an iron bar or a steel bar. And because of the iron pyrites, fool's gold inside slate, it caused the spark and the bar came shooting out like a rocket.
Oh gosh.
He had a small head, so luckily enough it did miss his head, and there's a bit of gap there as well. It went straight through the hat like a rocket. Didn't touch him at all. He wasn't injured. He didn't injure anybody else either. He was very, very lucky that day. But the point being, if you don't use proper tools and if you don't stick to the rules, accidents can happen. And in worst case scenarios, you could be paying with your life. And he did make it back to the meeting on time as well. Any questions?